When I woke up that morning, I thought it was just another dull Monday. But as I reached for my heart medication, a strange dizziness swept over me, sharp and sudden. I dropped the pill bottle, the clink echoing too loudly in the quiet kitchen, and I sank into the chair, my hand pressed to my chest, trying to steady the tremor. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. Something very wrong. It's hard to explain the exact feeling. It wasn't just fear, it was confusion, disbelief, and a deep, gnawing anxiety all tangled together. I looked around the small kitchen, the faint smell of burnt toast lingering in the toaster, sunlight filtering softly through the half-open blinds, the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, and everything looked normal. But I didn't feel normal. My body betrayed me, and a cold thought crawled into my mind. What if this wasn't an accident? My name is Farah, and I had always considered myself a careful, loving person. I had a husband who was kind, well, mostly, and a family that lived just a short drive away, or so I thought. For months, I had been battling a chronic heart condition. It wasn't severe, but it required strict medication, and I followed the routine to the letter. Every morning, one pill, sometimes two, and every morning I trusted that the medication I opened from the kitchen cabinet was exactly what it said on the label. That trust, that simple, fragile trust, would soon feel like a betrayal I couldn't have imagined. Our house wasn't large, but it had warmth. The living room smelled faintly of jasmine from the candle my mother-in-law always insisted on lighting. Her voice echoed sometimes, soft but insistent. "Farah, you must eat more. You're too thin." And I would smile politely, nodding, because I wanted her to like me. I had married her son, Imran, 4 years ago, and though our relationship was cordial, it had always been tinged with her subtle judgment. She had a way of making ordinary interactions feel heavy. A comment about my cooking, a raised eyebrow at my wardrobe, but nothing I thought would ever be dangerous. That morning, however, as I sat in the kitchen chair, trembling and dizzy, I noticed the pill in my hand looked slightly off. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe it was the dizziness playing tricks. But something about its color, the faint chalkiness under my fingers, didn't feel right. I swallowed it anyway, shaking, hoping it was just a fluke. Imran walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee trailing behind him. "Farah, you okay?" His eyes widened slightly when he saw me hunched over. I, I don't know, I whispered. "I felt dizzy. My chest, it's beating funny." He knelt beside me immediately, the usual calm that I loved in him replacing any hint of panic. "I'll call the doctor," he said, taking my hand in his. But even as I heard him speak, a small, stubborn doubt crept into my mind. Something didn't add up. I had taken this medication 1,000 times. It had always been fine, and now it felt like a trap. Weeks before, everything seemed normal. Our life followed the usual rhythms: breakfast together, Imran dropping me at work, picking up groceries, sharing dinners. My mother-in-law would call a few times a week, her voice warm, but carrying that faint edge I could never ignore. I like to think we had a polite relationship. She came over sometimes unannounced, which I didn't mind, because she helped around the house in small ways. I made her tea, we laughed softly about old family memories, and yet there were moments, tiny little moments, that I now realized were strange. The slightly too loud laugh when I mentioned my heart condition, the way she rearranged my pill cabinet when she thought no one was watching, the casual remark about how sometimes people just aren't careful with their health. At the time, I brushed these thoughts aside. I was stressed, tired, probably overthinking. But the dizziness that morning was different. It wasn't the fleeting faintness. It was heavy, insistent, like my body was warning me that something was amiss. Over the next few days, the episodes worsened. I would take my medication, and within an hour, my hands would shake uncontrollably, my vision would blur, and my chest would race. My doctor was puzzled. Blood work showed nothing unusual, vitals were inconsistent with my condition, and he frowned when I described the symptoms. It's unusual," he said carefully. "Perhaps your body is reacting differently. Try to keep a log of when this happens." But I couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. Something was wrong at home. I started paying attention to the little things, the way my mother-in-law would hover near the kitchen cabinet, the soft clink of pills being handled, the faint smell of powder in the air. My gut tightened whenever she was around, though I didn't understand why. One evening, I found myself sitting at the counter, staring at the row of pill bottles lined nicely in the cabinet. I picked up each one, examining it under the light. My hands shook as I compared them to the old prescription slips I kept in my wallet. And then I noticed it. One pill was slightly larger, the color slightly off. My heart raced, and I felt a cold wave of fear. Could it? No, it couldn't be. I wanted to dismiss it, but the thought had already taken root. That night, I barely slept. I watched my mother-in-law move around the house in her usual quiet manner, chatting softly with Imran about dinner plans, her voice light and motherly. And yet, every smile, every polite word felt tainted. I began to replay every small incident from the past months. The times I felt unusually weak after visiting her, the times pills seemed to go missing or be replaced. I was terrified to confront Imran. How could I tell him that his mother, the woman who had raised him and whom he adores, might be trying to harm me? And yet, I couldn't ignore the signs. My mind raced, weighing every possibility, every past moment that now looked like a warning. That week, I started secretly filming small interactions in the kitchen, noting the times my pills were touched. I became hyper aware of every movement, every shadow, every sound. The ticking clock, once comforting, now seemed to count down to some unknown disaster. It was in this haze of fear, confusion, and mounting suspicion that I realized the line between family love and betrayal could be dangerously thin, and I didn't yet know how deep the betrayal would go or how close I had come to losing everything. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. My husband, Imran, was kind, attentive, and loving. He noticed my fatigue and the strange heart episodes and did everything he could to help. He reminded me to take my medications on time, cooked small meals for me when I felt too weak, and sat with me in the evenings while I rested on the sofa. I wanted to trust him, to trust our life. I wanted the familiar warmth of home to feel safe again. But the incidents kept happening. It was always after I took my pills, dizziness, nausea, faint spells. My body felt like a stranger I no longer recognized. One evening, I remember sitting on the balcony, staring at the orange glow of the sunset reflecting off the rooftops, trying to make sense of my racing thoughts. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and wet earth after a light drizzle, but I could barely appreciate it. Every sound, the distant call of a bird, the soft hum of traffic, seemed amplified, like the world was warning me. I began noticing small things about my mother-in-law that I had previously ignored. Her voice had always carried that faintly judgmental edge, but now it seemed sharper, almost calculating. She would hover near the kitchen when I prepared my pills, her hands lingering over the cabinet, as if unconsciously monitoring me. Sometimes she would accidentally spill some sugar or flour on the counter, laughing softly as I cleaned it up, and I began noticing how easily her hands would brush against the pill bottles. One morning, I woke before dawn, unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest like a stone. I moved quietly through the house, the soft creak of the wooden floorboards beneath my bare feet, the scent of damp curtains in the early morning air. I checked my pills. The bottles were all in order, the labels facing outward as they always were, but something still didn't feel right. I hesitated, staring at the pills in my hand, and then I noticed a faint, powdery residue at the bottom of one bottle. My pulse quickened. I tried to dismiss it. Perhaps it was just dust or residue from the manufacturing process, but my gut told me otherwise. It was the same gut instinct that had saved me from other close calls in life, the quiet, insisting voice that whispers when something is wrong. I made a mental note to keep a close watch over my medication. The next clue came unexpectedly. I had returned from work, tired and drained, and was preparing my evening dose. My mother-in-law had stopped by, as she often did, carrying a small plate of fresh fruit.
"Here, Farah," she said, placing it on the counter. "You need your vitamins, too." Her voice was soft, almost tender, but there was an edge that made my stomach tighten. I smiled politely, nodded, and turned back to my pills. That night, after Imran had gone to bed, I began keeping a careful log. I recorded the time I took each pill, my symptoms, and every small interaction my mother-in-law had with the medications. I started noticing patterns. Every time she had been near the pill bottles, my symptoms were worse, more severe. My hand shook as I wrote down the observations. Could it be intentional? Could she be trying to harm me? I knew it sounded paranoid. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was building like a storm on the horizon, impossible to ignore. I began to watch her more closely, noting how she moved through the house, the faintest smiles or gestures that didn't match the words she spoke. And then one evening, I caught her. I had been sitting quietly in the kitchen, pretending to read a book, when she appeared in the doorway. She hummed softly, a tune I had never heard before, and reached for a pill bottle. My breath caught in my throat. She unscrewed the cap, poured a pill into her palm, and examined it under the dim kitchen light. My stomach knotted. I wanted to scream, to rush forward, to confront her, but I stayed frozen, watching her with a cold, sharp focus. She shook her hand slightly as if testing the pill's texture, and then she smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile, like she was pleased with herself. My mind reeled. Could it really be true? Could she really be replacing my medication? I felt a wave of nausea, dizziness, and a creeping sense of betrayal so profound it almost knocked me off my chair. The person I had welcomed into my life, the woman I had tried to bond with, the mother of my husband, could she truly want me harmed? That night I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The moonlight spilled softly across the room, illuminating the faint outline of Imran asleep beside me. I wanted to wake him, tell him everything, but I hesitated. How could I explain that his mother, his beloved mother, was sabotaging my health? I didn't want to believe it myself, and yet I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something had to be done. The next day, I took a small, careful step. I ordered a new batch of my medication from a different pharmacy and kept it locked away, hidden in a drawer that only I could access. My hands trembled as I took the first pill, ensuring it was correct. Relief washed over me, but it was brief. I knew this was only the beginning of uncovering the truth. And then the tipping point arrived. One morning, my dizziness became almost unbearable. I nearly collapsed in the kitchen, my vision blurring, the world tilting dangerously. Imran rushed to me, concern etched into his features. "Farah, talk to me. What's happening?" Through shaky breaths, I whispered, "It's the pills. Something's wrong. I don't think they're real." His face went pale. "What do you mean, not real?" I hesitated, afraid to voice the thought that had been festering in my mind. "I think someone replaced them." He stared at me, disbelief and panic mixing on his face. And I realized in that moment that the battle wasn't just mine, it was ours. Together we had to uncover the betrayal that had been lurking quietly, insidiously in our home, a betrayal that could have cost me my life. The following days were tense beyond anything I had ever imagined. Every movement in the house, every soft creak of the floorboards, every quiet hum of conversation felt charged with suspicion. I became acutely aware of my mother-in-law's presence, how she lingered a little too long in the kitchen, how her hands brushed over the counters, how her eyes darted toward the pill bottles as if she were guarding some secret. I watched her, silently, my pulse quickening each time she moved. One morning, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I would know the truth no matter how painful it might be. I had a small, inconspicuous camera I kept in the kitchen for work-from-home calls. I positioned it so it would capture the pill cabinet without her noticing. Then I went about my day as usual, trying to mask my anxiety, pretending everything was normal. Later that afternoon, I reviewed the footage. My hands shook as I clicked through the video, each second crawling by. And then I saw it, clear as day. She appeared in the kitchen, humming softly, her smile calm, almost motherly. But her hand reached for my pill bottle, and she unscrewed the cap with practiced ease. She poured a single pill into her palm, and in that small, deliberate movement, I saw her swap it with another pill from a hidden container she had brought. It was sugar. I froze, my chest tightening, my stomach dropping. My mother-in-law, the woman I had tried to bond with, the woman who had always offered me polite smiles and unsolicited advice, had been sabotaging my medication. I watched the footage over and over, unable to believe my eyes. Every time I saw it, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and heartbreak coursed through me. How could someone do this to another human being? To someone who lived under the same roof, shared the same meals, and was part of the family? My hands trembled as I realized the depth of her betrayal. This wasn't a careless mistake. It was deliberate, calculated. I confronted her that evening, trying to keep my voice steady. "Amina," I said, using her name instead of the soft "ma. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked toward me, feigning curiosity. "What is it, dear?" she asked, her tone sugary, masking whatever thoughts lay beneath. I held up the footage on my phone, my fingers shaking. "I saw this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You replaced my medication with sugar pills." For a moment, she was silent. And then she laughed, a quiet, almost chilling laugh. "Farah," she said, tilting her head, "you're imagining things. You're stressed. This is nonsense." "No," I said, my voice growing firmer. "I have proof. I've watched it. You've been doing this for months. Do you have any idea what could have happened? I could have died." Her face changed then, the carefully maintained mask slipping, revealing something darker. Perhaps satisfaction or pride in her cunning. "You worry too much," she said, softly, almost mockingly. "I only wanted to make sure you understood your place here. Sometimes people need a little reminder." A cold anger rose inside me, and for a moment I saw her not as my husband's mother, not as a family member, but as someone who had been living alongside me with the intent to harm. My mind reeled, trying to process her calm, her audacity. How could she justify this? How could she smile while knowing the risk she had put me in? I left the room, my hands trembling, my heart racing. Imran followed me shortly after, having overheard part of the confrontation. "What happened?" he asked, his face pale. "I said she did it," I simply said, showing him the footage. "She replaced my pills. She's been trying to make me sick. I don't know why, but she's done it for months." Imran's reaction was a mix of shock and disbelief. His mother, the woman who had raised him, whom he loved and respected? Could it be true? But as he watched the footage, his expression hardened. He didn't argue, he didn't laugh, he simply nodded. The gravity of the situation sank in. We spent hours discussing what to do. Confronting her had only revealed her nonchalant cruelty, and we both realized that this was something we couldn't ignore. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was life-threatening. And yet there was a part of me that felt a deeper hurt than anger. This was family. And family, I had always believed, protected each other, not endangered each other. The next morning, we decided to test her one last time, a careful experiment to ensure there was no mistake. I took my medication under Imran's supervision, using the new batch from the locked pharmacy supply. No dizziness, no nausea, nothing. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with the bitter taste of betrayal. When my mother-in-law came to check on me later, I watched her closely, noticing the slight twitch in her eyes, the subtle tension in her posture. She must have known that we had discovered her. Later that evening, I confronted her again, this time with Imran present. "You can't deny it," I said, my voice trembling with controlled rage. "We have proof, and this could have killed me. Why?" She looked at us both, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice calm but cold. I I wanted you to understand that you're not the center of this family. Sometimes life teaches lessons in unexpected ways. You were too comfortable, too complacent. This was necessary. Her words struck me harder than any slap or scream could have. The calculated rationalization of her cruelty, the way she tried to justify attempting to harm me, it was horrifying. I felt a shiver run down my spine. But beneath the fear and anger, a steely resolve began to form. I wasn't going to let her continue. Not to me, not to anyone. That night, I lay in bed thinking of everything that had happened. The betrayal was raw, deep, and personal. But I also realized that fear, though powerful, could not dictate my actions. I needed a plan, a careful, measured response that would ensure my safety and bring the truth to light.
The moment the reality sank in, I knew I couldn't let fear control me. I couldn't stay paralyzed, living under the shadow of someone who had actively tried to harm me. That night, I lay awake, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock, thinking through every possible move. I had to be strategic. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival, justice, and reclaiming the safety of my home. I began by taking stock. My first priority was my health. I removed all my medication from the accessible cabinet and locked it in a small, portable safe. Only Imran and I had the combination. I arranged for new prescriptions at a pharmacy that my mother-in-law didn't know about, and I even asked the pharmacist to double-check each pill before dispensing it. Every morning, I took the medication under Imran's watchful eye. It felt strange to rely so heavily on another person, but I realized I needed a support system. Next, I turned my attention to the evidence. The footage from my camera in the kitchen was clear, but I wanted more. I set up a second camera in a different angle, capturing every moment near the kitchen counter where my pills were kept. I didn't confront her again immediately. I waited, letting her return to her usual routines, confident in her perceived impunity. And sure enough, she came to the cabinet again. Her hands lingered, her fingers brushing against the bottles, her soft humming masking her intent. I felt a chill as I watched her carefully swap one pill for another. At this point, my anger was tempered by cold calculation. I knew a public confrontation without preparation could backfire. She was cunning, and she had spent years manipulating small details, hiding her resentment beneath a facade of politeness. I needed a plan that would protect me, expose her, and prevent any further harm. I began by taking documentation. Times, dates, symptoms, and observations. I even kept a small notebook hidden under my bed. Each incident, each act of sabotage became a record, a pattern I could later present if necessary. Writing it down helped me regain a sense of control. Fear had gripped me, but now I had evidence, and evidence was power. One evening, I overheard her talking to a neighbor on the phone. "Don't worry, everything is fine. She's just a little dramatic, that's all," she said in her usual soft, honeyed tone. My heart sunk.
She wasn't just trying to harm me physically, she wanted to make me feel insane, to doubt my own senses. That realization steeled my resolve. I would not allow her to control the narrative. I also knew I needed allies. Imran, of course, was my closest support, but I reached out to my closest friend, Aisha, who had always been level-headed and rational. I showed her the footage, and her reaction was one of shock, followed by immediate concern. Farah, you need to protect yourself. This isn't just a family issue anymore. You have to take action, and you need to document everything. Her words were like a spark. I realized I had been moving cautiously, almost silently, but I needed to be proactive. I started setting subtle traps, placing harmless pills in visible locations while secretly keeping the real medication secure. I wanted to confirm that her interference was consistent, and each time my plan worked. Every time she swapped a pill, I caught it on camera. My stomach twisted with a mix of fear and grim satisfaction. I wasn't just waiting anymore. I was controlling the situation. One morning, I decided it was time to confront her in a controlled setting. I prepared the dining room for our conversation. Imran was present, silently supportive, ready to step in if needed. I placed the footage on my laptop and opened the folder. When she entered, her expression was calm, but I could feel the tension beneath the surface. "Sit down," I said softly but firmly. "We need to talk." She hesitated, then sat, her hands folded in her lap. I began calmly, showing her the footage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make threats. I simply let the evidence speak. Each clip played in sequence. Her unscrewing the bottles, swapping pills, inspecting them, and her face shifted subtly with each scene. At first, she maintained a neutral mask, but the cracks began to show. The faint twitch of her lips, the dart of her eyes, the slight furrow of her brow. "I know what you've been doing," I said softly, but steady. "I've been keeping records and I have proof. This stops now. You have endangered my life. Do you understand what you've done?" For a moment, there was silence. Then she leaned back, her calm facade returning. "Farah, you overreact," she said softly. "I only wanted to teach you a lesson, that's all." I felt my blood boil, but I didn't respond with anger. Instead, I let her words hang in the air, letting her see the weight of her actions reflected in my eyes. "A lesson?" I asked quietly. "A lesson that could have killed me?" She didn't answer. She simply looked away, the silence between us stretching uncomfortably. In that moment, I realized the power of truth. The evidence was undeniable, and though she tried to rationalize her actions, her justification crumbled under its own absurdity. I didn't need to yell or scream. The footage had already done what words could not. After that day, I began taking steps to ensure my ongoing safety. I changed the locks on the house, keeping Imran in the loop, and I removed her access to our medication entirely. She came less frequently, and when she did, her movements were careful, restrained. It was clear she understood that her control had ended. And yet, there was a lingering emotional ache. Betrayal by someone so close, someone entrusted with family bonds, leaves scars that time cannot immediately heal. I felt a mix of relief, anger, sadness, and an odd sense of vindication. The woman who had threatened my life was now aware that I was no longer powerless.
After the controlled confrontation, the atmosphere in the house shifted. My mother-in-law, once so confident and domineering, now moved cautiously, aware that her actions had been exposed. But I realized that hiding the truth inside our household wasn't enough. The betrayal had been so severe, attempting to endanger my life, that it could not simply remain behind closed doors. Imran and I discussed it late into the night, the soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminating the worry etched on both our faces. Farah, he said finally, taking my hand, we need to involve someone official. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is criminal. I nodded, the weight of the decision settling over me. It wasn't easy. The thought of involving authorities against a family member, someone so close to Imran, filled me with guilt. But guilt, I realized, was different from accountability. Accountability meant safety. Accountability meant ensuring that no one else would be harmed. The following day, we went to the pharmacy, showing them the evidence, and requested a statement about the pill batches and any discrepancies. We also consulted a lawyer, explaining the situation fully, and obtained guidance about pressing formal charges for attempted harm. Every step we took was measured, careful, and documented. I didn't want this to escalate into chaos, but I needed the truth to be undeniable, visible, and irreversible. Word spread quietly at first. Only a few close family members knew, but the ripple effect was immediate. Those who had previously dismissed my concerns now saw the clear evidence. There were questions, discussions, hushed conversations at family gatherings, and careful avoidance from some who had been on my mother-in-law's side. It was a strange mix of relief and discomfort. The betrayal was public within our family, yet handled with the dignity I insisted upon. One evening, my mother-in-law finally confronted me again, her voice softer than before, almost wary. Farah, I didn't realize you would go this far, she said, her eyes darting nervously. It was a mistake. I didn't mean, I interrupted gently, holding her gaze. You attempted to harm me. You put my life at risk. Didn't mean doesn't undo that. She looked away, a flicker of shame crossing her features. I realized then that confrontation alone wasn't enough. Healing, both hers and mine, would be a long, uncertain process. I didn't wish her physical harm, but I knew trust could never fully return. Sometimes the lesson is not revenge, but boundaries. Protection, in its quiet dignity, becomes the truest form of justice. Over the next weeks, I focused on rebuilding the sense of safety that had been shattered. I rearranged our home, ensuring every corner felt like mine again, that my medications, my routines, my space were untouchable by anyone with harmful intent. Imran and I spent more evenings talking openly, rebuilding the emotional bridge that had been threatened by fear and betrayal. The moments were quiet, intimate, a soft touch on the hand, laughter over a shared meal, the warmth of a home finally feeling secure again. I also learned to trust myself more deeply. My instincts, the subtle awareness that had first alerted me to danger, were invaluable. I had learned not to dismiss my intuition, to observe patterns, and to act decisively when something felt wrong. It was a lesson in self-reliance and vigilance, one I hoped would guide me through future challenges. Over time, the public consequences for my mother-in-law took form. Close family members who had been unaware of the full truth began to see her actions clearly. The pharmacy issued warnings and records, the lawyer ensured accountability, and although she wasn't criminally prosecuted, the evidence was sufficient to prevent further harm, but handled delicately to maintain some semblance of family cohesion. The social consequences were undeniable. She was watched carefully, her movements more restrained, her attempts at control diminished. The subtle power she once wielded was gone, replaced by a cautious awareness of limits. Healing was gradual. I found solace in small routines. Walking through our garden, the smell of fresh jasmine and damp earth grounding me, cooking meals that reminded me of normalcy, reading in the evenings while Imran prepared tea beside me.
The fear that had gripped me for months slowly loosened its hold. I could breathe again without hesitation, sleep without terror. And though the emotional scars remained, a quiet memory of betrayal, a lingering awareness of danger, they no longer dictated my life. I also reached out to friends and distant relatives, sharing the story carefully, not for drama, but as a cautionary tale. Boundaries, vigilance, and trust must coexist. Love alone is not enough when safety is at stake. I wanted them to understand that even in family, one must be aware, observant, and ready to protect themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the living room, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal had been deep, almost unimaginable, but it had also revealed the strength I carried quietly within me, the resilience, the courage, the ability to act decisively in the face of danger. I felt a sense of empowerment, a recognition that I could survive even the most intimate forms of betrayal. Imran squeezed my hand, and in his eyes I saw relief, love, and shared resolve. He said, "We're safe now." I nodded, realizing that while some wounds never fully disappear, they can become reminders of strength rather than sources of fear. And for the first time in months, I felt the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming my life. The house felt like home again, not a place of hidden danger, but a sanctuary. The lessons were clear. Vigilance, courage, and truth are the cornerstones of safety. Love must be paired with awareness, and trust must be earned, not assumed. I learned to trust my instincts, to act decisively, and to seek help when something felt wrong. And those choices saved me. Healing has not been instantaneous. There are moments when I recall the fear, the dizziness, the quiet smile my mother-in-law wore while trying to hurt me. And yet, there are also moments of triumph. Seeing justice quietly take its course, reclaiming my space, and knowing that my life was not defined by fear, but by courage. I share my story not to shame, but to warn and empower. Sometimes the people who should love us most may disappoint us in unimaginable ways. And sometimes the strength we need is already within us, quiet, persistent, and capable of protecting our lives and dignity. So I ask you, dear listener, as you reflect on this story, would you have recognized the signs? Would you have acted even when it meant confronting someone you loved? Life sometimes tests us in ways we cannot foresee, but courage, truth, and vigilance always guide the way. If my story resonates with you, please subscribe for more real-life experiences and share your thoughts below. Your voice matters, and together we remind each other that even betrayal cannot steal the strength we carry within.